Good morning, everyone. My name is Just Ibe, and I am the president of the Association of African Startups. What we do at the Association of African Startups is create a platform for development, for collaboration of startups across the 55 countries in Africa, so that we can raise a set of entrepreneurs that are prepared and equipped to rebuild the economy of the African continent. And this is a course we are doing in partnership with Strengths Africa, and that's why you have Mr. Taiwo Adepoju here. He's going to be introducing himself. So, Mr. Taiwo, please introduce yourself.
Awesome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're in. My name is Taiwo Adepoju, as rightly introduced by Lady Just Ibe, the president of the Startup Association of African Startup Association. Clearly, this is in conjunction with Strength Africa. We've just concluded the Startup Summit, and we're hoping that this would help to build the enabling ecosystem within Africa and beyond. Tune in. This promises to be an interesting ride. So I'm going to be sharing the screen just about now.
Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic.
Good.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing screen. And what we are talking about today is an introductory course on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is a vehicle for Africa's economic transformation. Herein, we're going to be sharing with you everything you need to know about the AFCTA and why it's important for you as a business owner to pay attention to what is going on in Africa, and perhaps how you can even leverage the market. It's going to be a series of training. This is the first of its kind, where we're giving you a full-blown introduction, just intimating you on the things you need to know as we go deeper. By the next time when we're having a second course on this, we will now go into how you can actually get started immediately. I'm talking about the nitty-gritty. So please pay attention as we go further into the next thing on this agenda. Please go forward, sir.
Yes. So I almost ran ahead of myself. The course objective essentially just outlines what you would expect, and at the end of the day, you're able to cross or check your list and say, this is what you're expected to get at the end of the day. There's going to be inside provision into the business implication of the African Free Trade Agreement. It's going to be distilling this pillar that is said to bridge the gap and ensure that there is a border-free Africa. We're also going to talk about the need to help businesses understand the context, all right, of the agreement, because when the purpose of a thing is not known, abuse is inevitable. We're going to be enlightening on the protocols and the way forward for the trade in goods and services, as well as the subsequent negotiation. And you understand what we mean by this as we progress with the course. Also, there is a clear implication, or there are implications for businesses and startups. This will become very obvious shortly. You also need to understand that beyond just creating a free trade area and an agreement that establishes it, there is a need to understand that there are also other barriers that has been hindering trade or inter-trade between Africa, and you get to understand this. Then there's the fourth priority, and we also came up with a model to say there are 8 S's, all right, the critical components towards achieving a positioning for this thing called Afcfta. So we'll move slowly on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, sir, for telling us about the objectives. We'll move straight into the perspectives that we want us to consider before we go into the course proper. And the first thing, or the first person we're going to be talking about, is a man I truly, truly love. I love Dr. Kwame Nkrumah so very much, because I believe that he caught a vision that so many people did not understand at a time people were not even thinking. And this goes to show that if somebody several centuries ago could understand this perspective, if we, the current Africans, the current African entrepreneurs, are not seeing this, it means that we're not necessarily thinking futuristic, especially with the benefit of the African continent at mind. He said, it is clear that we must find an African solution to Africa's problem, and this can only be found in African unity. He said, divided, we are weak. United, Africa can become one of the world's, or one of the greatest forces for good in the world. What he was trying to talk about in the very simple terms is the way we are partitioned as African countries in Africa, our economies are created in a way that we cannot thrive. So imagine a small country like Djibouti functioning as an economy in competition with a China that is a world economy. That's already tantamount to self-sabotage. It will most likely fail compared to the bigger economy. So what Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was trying to say is our partition, our borders is really not working, it's not really giving us an advantage as an economy. But if we come together, we can create a global economy that can match and compete at a global level that's beneficial for our individual countries, of course, also as we play on the global market. So that's basically what he was trying to say.
And just to add a bit of that, for those that don't know who Dr. Kwame Nkrumah is or was, at some point he was the first president of Ghana, and he rallied Africans across, globally and even within the continent, through his stance as to ensuring that Africans pursue, this need for unity. And he was indeed the father of unification across Africa. I recall in one of his statements at the Organization of African Unity, when he said, "Seek ye first the political kingdom, and every other thing will be added." And he made that statement because it was important for Africans to start to see themselves, as a unified, set, rather than as a divided group. Yeah, the next perspective is around the Ethiopian Prime Minister that was recently awarded the Nobel Prize Award for Peace. And this is a pointer to the reality around what Africa stands to begin to benefit from uniting or aligning forces. He got that after a long-standing battle with Eritrea, and he was able to, ameliorate this and bring a stop to this lingering standstill that had kept the two nations at loggerhead. This is a pointer to some of the benefits and some of the things that is kickstarting this growth across Africa. I don't know if your lady has anything to say on this matter.
Fantastic. I think the only thing I want to add is what he basically was able to accomplish is, can we stop fighting each other? Basically, it's as simple as that. Can we put an end to those ethnic, tribal, border wars, land disputes, all of those things? He said, because the more we focus on those things, the more we are losing out on the big picture, economic growth and development. So he was able to put an end to that long-standing war between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and now they can forge ahead and do better things, right? Even if there's another issue right there in Ethiopia, but that's not the bone of contention in today's conversation between Ethiopia and Tigray, but that's not what we're talking about here today. So let's move on to the next perspective.
The reason why we're sharing perspective is to also, I liked what everyone thinks, around or about AFTA. And so there's Caroline. She is the Global Director of Trade and Investment and Competitiveness. And she's written a book as to how rich nations remain rich and then the poor become richer if this is done properly. And in this statement, in this perspective, lending voice to the African Free Trade Area Agreement, it says, creating a single continent-wide market for goods and services, business and investment will reshape African economies. She says that the implementation of AFTA would be a huge step forward for Africa, demonstrating to the world that it is emerging as a leader on the global trade agenda. And there are lots of figures around this. As to say, one, Africa is just contributing only about, I think, 3 to 4% to global trade. Beyond that, Africa is trading within itself in less than, I think, in a single, well, maybe less than 12 to 15%. And we're hoping that these figures can go. So imagine when everybody within Africa is coming together to trade. You can imagine the benefits for Africa and indeed Africans.
Fantastic. And the next one is Dr. Albert G. Zulfak, who is a Cameroonian national, but most importantly, he's the World Bank's chief economist for Africa. He said the African Continental Free Trade Area has the potential to increase employment opportunities and incomes. It has the potential to help expand opportunities for all Africans. Please take note of what he's saying. The AFCTA is expected to lift around 68 million people out of moderate poverty and to make African countries more competitive. But successful implementation will be key, including careful monitoring of impact on all workers, women and men, skilled and unskilled, across all countries and sectors, ensuring the agreement's full benefits. Allow me to unpack his statement. What he's trying to say in essence is Afcfta is not just for business owners, it's for every African native. It's for every African citizen. Whether you're unemployed, though, there are opportunities for you. Whether you are employed, though, you can upskill. Whether you are skilled and unskilled, though, there's opportunity for you in this AFCTA agreement. But he's trying to say that there must be parameters that must be set up for every indices on this agreement to be met. That means we must set up parameters that measures that what we created this thing for is actually meeting its objective. I like this, Mr. Taiwo. You know, one of the things I've been saying is in the AFCTA, are there loopholes? How can we create the solutions for the loopholes? He just mentioned something here. He said we must make sure that parameters are created to monitor every single factor to be sure that is benefiting everybody. So Mr. Taiwo, that's something I want us to write down. We will talk about it after this class, because he has opened up to us an opportunity that we as a people must begin to figure out how can we help the African Union and all the different countries come up with parameters that help them monitor everything mentioned here today so that it's fully beneficial. Because if it's not fully beneficial, Africans are not going to be interested. And the goal is, why do we have access to second largest markets? And by size, largest market. When I mean by size is, this is the largest trade area where there are 55 countries participating, because all of them have signed it as at the last meeting I listened to. What this goes to show is we have such a potential to radically transform the economy of Africa if we make sure that implementation is followed to the later. And just to give a quick cap of everything that has been talked about in the perspectives, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said we must come together. If not, divided, we look like miniature nations. That's the simple interpretation. And then the second person went for that to say that we should stop fighting each other. All those tribal war conflicts were keeping us backward. The world has moved forward. We were busy fighting over land and borders. That's what the second person basically was trying to say. The third person basically was trying to say that AFCTA is the largest and the best thing that has happened to Africa. While the fourth person is saying this thing can work, it will help you guys. Well, make sure that parameters are put around to measure everything. Having discussed these perspectives, wherever you're sitting, I need you to begin to look at it and say, if I've ignored AFCTA since it has been talked about in the last couple of years, perhaps I need to begin to rethink it, because there's opportunity for me as an African native. Having said that, you now need to start worrying, thinking about this deeply to say, are there solutions I can actually bring to the table to even help them make their work a lot more seamless as they progress in the implementation? Because whether we like it or not, Mr. Taiwo, this process is not going to be very seamless, especially in the first few years. We are going to struggle. But Africans must see that it's okay for us to struggle in the first 3 years, 4 years, even 5 years. But while we are struggling, our dear Africans that are thinking about how to help the African Union and all the 55 countries to make this process a lot more seamless. The African Union is not a superstar. I need you to know that. They're not superstars. Your presidents in the 55 countries are not superstars. These are just people who are working earnestly and tirelessly to see what they can even do to make this country, this continent better. Are there flaws? Maybe, but that's not the bone of contention. We have seen an opportunity. AFCTA is the opportunity. And we are all going to make sure we leverage that opportunity to be beneficial to each and every one of us, with no one being left out in this agreement.
Lady, you just captured it succinctly. And I would just like to buttress on two key cardinals you mentioned. One, you talked about implementation. Implementation, synonymous with execution, is the doing that will get the job done. So we need to now start doing. We need to, and this is the Association of African Startups. We need to have more startups. And that's what also Strength Africa is positioned to get about. That until we start to trade or even start those businesses or industries that will trade, we cannot even experience the full benefit of Afcfta. The second thing is around competitiveness. Now, the only reason why today you would rather, or we have a lot of imports into Africa, and particularly in Nigeria, where I'm resident today, is that the products that are churned out are not competitive. They are not globally competitive. So Afcfta, all right, ultimately provides that opportunity to ensure that our products, our produce can, march towards global competitiveness. And I'll leave it at that. So I'm sure a lot of people have been wondering, what is this Afcfta or this Afcfta? Lady, do you want to throw on a light on what Afcfta is?
Yes, AFCTA is a trade agreement which provides momentum and additional commitment mechanism to provide an opportunity to improve trade facilitation widely in the continent, at borders and along corridors between African countries. Meaning, we have identified that, see, we can leverage trading within ourselves. We can leverage importation within ourselves. We can leverage exportation within ourselves. Yes, there's a global market. We don't want to work in isolation from the global market, but we too ourselves, we're a market. And the agreement is such that it's not enough to create an intervention, because several interventions have been created in the past. The reason why those interventions did not work is because an agreement was not reached by all the 55 countries and their presidents. But this one, they have signed the agreement. That means they have accepted to make this regional market work. And for regional market to work, it needs you and me, SMEs, startups, entrepreneurs across the 55 countries. And that's why you are a bona fide beneficiary of this entire scheme, because your president has signed that he has given you access to go and do business on this platform. The big question is, are you going to turn a blind eye to a market that has access to 55 countries, 1.3 or 1.4 billion people, and basically even an interaction with other global citizens on this platform? So basically, that's what it means. And the acronym, what it means is African Continental Free Trade Area.
Yeah, and that is it, and that captures it succinctly. And just so that before pundits begin to think that, hey, will this thing work or will it not work? I would like us to go through the critical milestones that this journey has gone through. So remember, when we started to introduce the perspectives, we talked about Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and he talked about the launch of at the launch in 1963 of the Organization of African Union. There was a need, there was a call entreating all Africans to work towards the United States of Africa. Well, that was a statement, and that dropped a seed in the minds of leaders across Africa, but it only just started to grow. And in 1970, we had the establishment of the regional communities. What I mean by the regional communities, for those that are in West Africa, you hear about ECOWAS. For those in South Africa, you hear about SADC. And then you also hear about COMESA and all of that. So in 1970, the platform was set to start to have the economic hubs. By 1991, something significant happened. There was a need to set up African Economic Community, almost like what you have in the European Union. Just also to be more dynamic, the focus for providing peace and prosperity across Africa changed. And there was now a need for economic redirection. And that led up to the change or a relaunch of the Organization of African Union, and it became the African Union, the AU, as we know it today. And they went on to set out an agenda, Agenda 2063. We moved on that journey. There was a Pan-African Parliament that was set up in 2004. In 2012, there was some kind of trade. So they had what you call the BIAT, a precursor to the finalization of the tripartite agreement in 2014 on the free trade area. By 2015, the launch of the CFTA negotiations began after starting to see the light of day. And by 2018, the signing of an agreement was done. I'm sure in Rwanda. But that's the beauty of this journey. This journey has gone through, the rough road. And so to the point to those that think that this is coming suddenly, no. We have been on this path, and it's finally here. And it will take, like I remember, I said, it will take the doing, the experimentation, the exploring of the agreement to see whether it's going to work for us or it might not work. But it is the doing that will get the job done. Lady, take on the details.
Fantastic. So just to give us a proper understanding, the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area, Afcfta, was signed at the 10th Extraordinary Summit of the African Union Assembly on 21 March 2018 in Kigali, Rwanda. The Afcfta agreement entered into force on 30th May 2029. The Afcfta is the continent's most ambitious integration initiative. The main objectives of the Afcfta is: one, create a single continental market for goods and services with free movement, business persons, and investments. Allow me to stop there and unpack that just a little bit. In Africa right now, there are lots of countries where you cannot go in and out easily. You have to apply for visa, apply for all those things, and it's not funny. Right, quite frankly, it's not funny. Even if there are lots of countries now who have moved the ban and now put it on visa on arrival, but there's still a lot of other countries where it's a hassle to get in and out. So you can imagine if human beings are finding it difficult to get in and out. So how do you transport goods and services in and out those borders? So you see why this is important. Creating a single continental market of goods and services with free movement of persons, of business persons and investment. That means I can easily wake up tomorrow and say, I'm going to Cote d'Ivoire. And as I'm getting there, nobody's asking me questions. They stamp my visa on arrival. And I can be carrying goods and nobody's asking me too many questions. That makes trade difficult. The second thing is expanding intra-Africa trade across regional economic communities and the continent in general. If I'm able to move freely, I can transport goods freely. Then enhance competitiveness and support economic transformation. Meaning that if the world now knows that you can trade with Africa on a regional or a global level, exploitation reduces. That's what it means. Exploitation reduces. Because if they know that you guys don't have that level of access or community gathering or community trading, they can easily come to you and tell you that they'll pay you $1 when it can actually be $1,000 if you guys know what's obtainable because you are collectively trading on a regional level. So it will improve competitiveness and it will support economic transformation. And that's why this is very important. Another thing I really want to buttress here is that in 2021 and in this decade, communities are going to be very big. What I mean by communities is you have to get planted in a place where things are going on, where people know and have access to information that you don't have. So as a business owner, even if you're not very experienced and you're planted in the Afcfta community, what you don't know, there'll be other businesses that know and will save you a lot of trouble if you just have those information. So we need to pay attention to this very deeply so that we don't lose out on the opportunities coming.
Latching on to what you just said, in line with what is going on globally, and even in line with the new world order, it's clear now that innovation is not enough. And I love the fact that after, even though it was conceived prior to the new world order, has underlined the need for transformation. So there's actually a wind of change, which is not coincidental. I think it's even it's almost strategic. So at this time when the world is moving, the global village is further becoming even a global community. There is now a need for superior economic transformation, and AFTA portends that solution. Now, let's just talk a bit about, because I recall when Lady just said something around the objectives. We were talking around the objectives, and we said, okay, you might be wondering, okay, what is all this English that we're talking around after? But you see, when the purpose of a thing is not known, abuse is inevitable. So we have taken time to say, you need to understand the context of after, understand the perspective there. And so just to also lend this voice, so after went through a first phase, and that first phase was around negotiations. And they had several certain protocols that they needed to. And three were germane in all of these things. One was the trade in goods, all right? So before now, if you are moving from Lagos to Cotonou or any of those regions along the West African coast, there usually would be blockages. There will be a need to either pay tariff and all of that. So one of the first things that was done, in that agreement, before the signing of the agreement, was the economic team, the ministerial teams across all the continent sat down and started to say, okay, what goods will we allow? So because there was a need to determine the goods to be allowed. And so one of the key things that was negotiated was the goods to be allowed. So we needed to determine that these goods originate from Africa. And this is to discourage dumping, because we know what happens when the borders are open. People will come and start to dump goods, even in our continent. Then the second was around trade in services. So there was also a need for the committee to agree on saying, look, what are those services that we will allow? Because before now, Africa has been fighting with itself. And I'm sure we're also not oblivious of the xenophobia that has happened. So how would it be such that it will not affect the other country? And so they had to put heads together, and they agreed on what those services will be. Then thirdly, remember, if we've established the goods, identify the services, there's also the need for this dispute resolution. So in as much as we have an agreement, then we know that one thing is clear: there will be disputes. But when the disputes arise, is there a mechanism to bring about settlement of this dispute? And so that was the first phase of the after negotiations, and that led to the signing. We now have moved to the second phase, and that second phase now talks around investments. What kind of key investments we want to have, and how would investments move? How would money move? All right. There will be no embargo on movement of capital in and out of Nigeria, in and out of Ghana. So money will be resident in Africa, and it can move freely. The issue also around competition, for smaller countries. Remember, almost like the example Lady just gave, when Djibouti and say China, there will be an imbalance of trade. But with this understanding, even the bigger countries in Africa understand the need to make other countries, survive. So there will be some comparative advantages that will be shared across the continent. So if you are good in this, it'll be nice to deepen your understanding and your capacity along those lines. And this leads to what we call the global value chain. Then intellectual property. Intellectual property around, there is going to be a lot of creations. There are going to be a lot of inventions. So there will be a need to patent. So it will not just be copyrights in Lagos or in Abuja or in Port Harcourt, but if we, or as Africans, anywhere in Africa, come up with an idea, it's such that it has jurisprudence across Africa. And so there was a need to establish intellectual property. So that captures, in essence, the first two phases of the negotiations. And this is where we are to help deepen the African free trade agreement, free trade area agreement. And that takes care of that. So, lady, let's just, these are the areas covered, and just so that people can also understand that the policy area covered, talks about the tariff of manufactured goods, who is manufacturing what. We also want to know that tariff is the payment, all right, the custom duties paid on either agricultural products. So, lady, we have a lot of people in the association, and most people are either startups, SMEs, or innovation-driven organization. But the focus right now is around manufactured goods. So there'll be a lot of goods. There will be need to create master classes, create some education or training around having to manufacture goods, notwithstanding the deficit or deficiency in the infrastructure. There'll also be a focus on agricultural goods. So there'll be a lot of movement of food, but would that create what we call food insecurity? Only time will tell. Then export taxes, customs, compensation policy in case there are issues. And these things are ongoing. Then anti-dumping, like I said, so China is not going to be dumping here. No. There will be countervailing measures. And then we talked about the movement of capital, investments, intellectual property rights, and all of the other rights across the agreements that subsists the STEs, the TBEs, and the GATs. So I'll just leave you to also understand. So lady, can we have you just touch on some of the
I
things?
think you can go ahead with the policy areas covered and those not covered, and I'll move on to the next key findings in AFCTA.
All right. So also, like I said, in the New World Order, a couple of things would reduce. And so a lot of futurists have posited the fact that as Africa begins to trade, there will be a reduced level of aid. Remember, as Africa begins to trade, aid to Africa will be reduced. Yep. So, and as that reduces, it means that we need to be more proactive, and then we must look for sustainable measures to lead about growth. So this policy area does not cover state aid, because at some point the state needs to intervene. There are also some things that, say for instance, in Nigeria, the government cannot, there's a citizen, there's a sovereign government, all right, and it needs to take care of the citizen. So state aid will not be interfered with. So Nigerians will be the beneficiaries of the aids within Nigeria, and it's not for Africa. Public procurement is still also closely guided. So each country has their public procurement bill or act. And so this is not covered. If you want to go and compete in any African country, make sure you do the normal registration and understand how that country trades. Environmental laws also, we have different environmental laws that are applicable to our region. So in some part of Nigeria, there's erosion, there are a lot of laws that are peculiar to each region. And so those laws are for those regions or for even those countries. Then labor market regulations. Well, if you decide you want to work in Nigeria or you want to work in South Africa, there are rules. And these rules must be deeply entrenched because they were built over time, and it will not be trade that will not interfere with those rules. And this captures areas not covered. So, and this is the clarity in terms of the context. So, lady, go on with the key findings. Yeah?
Thank you so much, Mr. T. Thank you so much. I love what we're doing with this course. It's expository. I mean, and I like that it's audio visual. You can see, you can hear, so that those bulky documents don't make you feel like, please, this is not for me. This is for you. We have simplified it for you, so that all you need to do is listen, understand, and implement. Okay? And now we're going to be talking about the key findings of Afcfta. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement represents a major opportunity for countries to boost their growth, reduce poverty, and broaden economic inclusion. So allow me to talk about this in a way that the average MSME or SME or entrepreneur listening to will feel like this is for me. Because when you see countries to boost their growth, they'll say, hey, I'm not the country. Young man, young woman, you are the country. Nigeria does not exist if you don't exist. It's all of you coming together that even make us have a location called Nigeria. So when it says that it will help countries boost their growth, it means you, the business owner, will have an opportunity and an avenue to be able to penetrate other markets without doing all the work. If you were going to penetrate other markets right now, you will do so much work because there are so many things around the policies surrounding each country. But because there's an AFCTA agreement signed by countries, then it's easy for you to play on that platform and be able to grow your business. It also will reduce poverty. So it means that if a large chunk of people start trading on a regional platform, there will be lots of jobs that will come up. There will be lots and lots of jobs. What's his name? The Cameroonian man, the man who is the chief economist for the World Bank to Africa, he said
Albert.
68 million people will be taken out of moderate poverty. What that goes to show you is that there's such a huge opportunity that is going to come up for people. Those is both skilled, both unskilled, both digital, both manufacture, all kinds of opportunities. So right now, most of us entrepreneurs already have these things we are doing. We don't necessarily have to go and learn new things. What we know and what we are doing is already a vehicle that allows us to tap into this platform and just run on an autopilot. That's why you must understand what we are teaching you. Okay, and then the implementation of AFCTA would include about 30 million Africans will be pulled out of extreme poverty. So allow me to say this again. Dr. Zook, right? That's the man, Dr. Zook. He had mentioned that 68 million people will be lifted out of moderate poverty. Now, here, we found that about 30 million Africans will be pulled out of extreme poverty. So there's extreme poverty, there's moderate poverty. Anybody living below $5 a day is poverty, right? I don't even want to talk about the levels and the degrees. So there's moderate poverty, there's extreme poverty, and it will boost the incomes of nearly 68 million others who live in, I didn't even read that statement before I mentioned it, Mr. T. I didn't read that statement of $5, and I didn't even know it was in next. So it will boost the income of nearly 68 million others who live on less than $5.5 a day, meaning those are the ones moderate poverty. 68 million people out of moderate poverty, 30 million people out of abject poverty, extreme poverty. And I know that somebody's going to be saying to me, please, they cannot, there's poverty, what's my own? Listen, guys, while we're addressing this AFCTA, we must also address our personal responsibility as Africans. What is going on in Africa is your business. If it's not your business, you don't have a right to take money from what is not your business. So these statistics we're sharing with you today is for you to know that the things you have by way of goods and services that you want to exchange is a means to be able to do things for others. It's a means for able to produce or create an opportunity to actually help others get out of extreme poverty and moderate poverty. Once you have this understanding, it's easy for you to really position your business, increase your capacity to be able to serve a lot more people. Another thing it's going to do is improve Africa's income by $450 billion by 2025, which is a gain of 7%, while adding $76 billion to the income of the rest of the world. Oh, wow. Allow me look at this. I want us to both look at it together. So just by creating this market, $450 billion. Right now, the total GDP of the African continent is, I think, $3.2 trillion. The last time I checked, $3.2 trillion. I think that's what it is right now. And so if in 1 year we're able to increase our income just by these regional markets by $450 billion, do you know what would happen to Africa? Wow, I'm blown away. I am totally blown away. That means you and I, who are the businesses that actually increase the GDP of our continent, will be the ones getting the money. It's not the government. So I need you to understand this, because I know somebody's going to be sitting somewhere and say 450 billion, but it's for the government. Not necessarily. If you are trading on this platform, they are not going to collect your money from you. It is your money. It's the total of all the income of everybody that is collated to become GDP. Do you see what I mean? Right? So the next thing is also going to do is growth of Africa's exports by $560 billion, mostly in manufacturing. This is the part that is very delightful for me. Growth of Africa's exports. Listen, guys, to a very large extent, our raw materials are the ones fueling the biggest economies in the world. You didn't hear it. Let me say it again. Our raw materials in Africa is fueling the largest economies in the world. Meaning, if Africa is not sending what it has, the other economies will not exist. So the Afcta will give us a leverage to be able to do more, increase our export, both of the raw materials and actual manufactured goods. Because one of the things I want us to even begin to move forward as we go further in this conversation, maybe in the next installment of this conversation of the Afcta, is urbanization, industrialization, infrastructure development, so that we become a manufacturing dependent continent. And that increases our market value for the products and services that we send out, right? And so the next thing that's also going to happen is 10.5% women are going to experience a larger wage. Can I hear an amen for all the women who are listening? 10.5% of women are going to experience a larger wage. What I'm sure somebody's going to say, how did we come up across all of these statistics? These statistics have been done by a lot of the experts who put together all these documents. But majorly, if you look at Africa very well, there are lots of female entrepreneurs, especially in the small and medium enterprises. We are very plenty. What this is trying to say is that at least 10.5% of the women would experience a lot more income coming in. And then finally, it's going to improve wages for both skilled and unskilled workers, meaning that before, if you are a maybe bricklayer, I'm giving an example, right? Because you're involved in building, they are paying you maybe $5 a day. Because of a huge market, you're going to get a lot more money because there's a lot more people who are going to require your services. You're exposed to a larger market and then a lot more money for you. That means that you, who is both an unskilled and a skilled worker, you have to start increasing your capacity to be able to handle a lot more. Because for every great opportunity, capacity development is required for you to be able to step in and get a lot more. And I say this across board, skilled and unskilled workers. If there's skilled workers, in the Afcta, there's going to be a digitization as we go further. We may not talk about it in this particular one, this particular training. We'll talk about it maybe in the next one. The digitization would help all those who are skilled workers, people who have skills, to be able to actually scale exponentially. But that depends on how much capacity you have built. Have you built a team of people who can function from anywhere in the world, and you guys are churning results at an almost speed of light? So for every person that a big responsibility is given to, a lot more capacity is expected from the person to be able to deliver and maximize the opportunity. So yeah.
All right. So look, and I don't know if anybody heard you clearly, and you underscored the need for personal, you underscored the need for personal responsibility. And when you talk about personal responsibility, one of the key things that I've thought about in this instance is that, look, we must start to take things seriously. One of the things around the personal responsibility is that we cannot even start to talk about competitiveness if we don't increase our capacity. And that's one of the things that we try to achieve today, the Strengths Africa company and the Association of African Startups, to say our people need to be informed, but not just being informed, they have to be impacted and they have to have understanding of how this works. And this will further help them improve, their understanding, improve their skills, and get them prepared. Now, the second thing is some thing that I hear around the lazy man. The lazy man is that man that is not able to convert game or what he caught. So Africa, apologies, we have been lazy. And it's important now that we start to convert the raw materials, and refine them to the point where it can now create value by adding value, some little value addition. And then that's the only way we can start to play, globally along the value chain. So how does this fit into all of the Agenda 2023? And I'm sure with what I said, when AU was formed, after it was relaunched from Organization of African Unity, there was now a plan, a grand plan to say Africa must indeed become global. And only not just become global, must be one of the countries, the developed countries in the world. So all of this ties in the first implementation plan, which was also span between 2014 and 2023. And so we're approaching 2021 now. So under the AU agenda, and there's this clamor, there's the hashtag, I'm sure a lot of people have been saying it, the Africa we want. Now, we've seen that 8 regional economic communities have been officially, recognized by this, as blocks of the Afcfta. And those blocks would soon be going off, and it will now allow for proper intertrade. And we've listed all the 8 economic blocks. Now, the Agenda 2023 is Africa's framework for structural transformation. Remember, all of the barriers, all of those things that have impeded growth and trade is seen to be, there's a deliberate attempt to get them off. And it's a build on, and it aims to facilitate the implementation of existing continental initiatives. So there are a whole lot of initiatives geared towards trade in Africa. Now, after being established, it was going to create, so beyond just the free trade, there's now going to be a single African air transport market. So that would lead to a reduction, all right, in the cost of flight. Is it not shocking that if you wanted to fly to a neighboring country from Nigeria, you probably pay more than it would take you to get to Heathrow or even to Dubai? Why? Because there are a lot of taxes, the routes are not attractive, and so things are not happening. But with this, we hope that creating a single, African air market, it would lead to the free movement of people, and it will further ensure that the flagship of this Agenda 2063 are met. Now, AU has adopted legal instruments for the effective implementation of this flagship project. Importantly, the UN Agenda 2030, where they detailed the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and they have, they've cured it in the 20 goals of agenda, are also embedded in the 20 goals of the Agenda 2023. So when we want to talk about it, so clear to the group is the need to eliminate poverty. Clear to the group is to ensure that there's gender equality or parity. Clear to the group is the need to ensure that there's economic empowerment and development across all levels. Clear to the group is to eliminate hunger, and this is how Afcfta, right, fits into the Agenda 2063 and ties it on into the SDG. So, lady, go. You want to take on this? Saying under Afcfta. You're mute. I need to unmute you. Okay. Yeah.
I said, thank you so much. I hope that you guys are really enjoying what is going on. I don't know about you. I feel such a joy and lift in my spirit because I feel like finally a solution and an intervention to actually take Africa into the Africa that we desire. Africa, as far as I'm concerned, is the best place in the world. You know why? Everything we need, we have. Let me say it again. Africa is the best place in the world to live in. You know why? Everything we need, we have it. We don't need to go and beg to get. But because of mismanagement and a lot of things, bureaucracies, all of those things, we are where we are. But there is a generation of young Africans arising and saying, now we know what we have and we're ready to step into the driver's seat and take advantage of the opportunities given to us to make a radical transformation of our economy. And here, under Afcfta, extreme poverty will decline across the continent, with the biggest improvements in countries with currently high poverty rates. West Africa would see the biggest decline in the number of people living in extreme poverty, a decline of 12 million, more than a third of the total of all of Africa. This is humongous. This is humongous. Central Africa will see a decline of 9.3 million people. Eastern Africa will see a decline of 4.8 million people. South Africa will see a decline of 3.9 million people. Countries with the highest initial poverty rates will see the biggest decline in poverty rates. In Guinea-Bissau, the rate will decline from 37.9 to 27.7%. That's about 5.2%. I'm sorry, about 10%, 10.2% decline. That's such a lot. Wow. In Mali, the rate will decline from 14.4% to 6.8%. This is so good. That's about 50.52% decline. In Togo, it will decline from 24.1% to 16.9%. What these statistics goes to show us is that this market that we have found, that we have created as Africans for Africans, is something that will benefit our brothers and sisters who across the continent have looked for a solution but can't help themselves. Now, an avenue for you and I to step into the driver's seat and make sure that these beneficiaries are not left out just by simply getting on board of this initiative. Because once you get on board, the indices have been arranged and set so that as long as you are trading and you're participating, all of these people are actively impacted. So it's not like you're going to be sitting there and calculating, how am I going to do it? No, it's not your headache. As long as you are participating and trading and giving and doing what you need to be doing, leveraging the platform, these lives are going to be transformed. The big question I need you to take away from this particular slide is, if this number of lives are going to be transformed by your active participation, would you turn a blind eye? Would you turn a deaf ear? Or you would jump into it and say, alas, I have an opportunity to be able to do something for the mother continent. Yeah.
I recall whilst we're speaking, I think previously, we talked around the opportunities as to the times that we're in, that it appears that I don't want to see it as a coincidence. So who would have envisioned that a COVID-19, that this pandemic, and then just even the second round, what we call the second wave is such that it's now almost seeming that Africa truly needs to trade with Africa.
Yep. Now, we don't need aid anymore. We need trade.
Yes, we need trade. And look at what happened. So during COVID, imports into Africa reduced, but Africa did not have to die.
Yep.
All right. So the potential positive effects.
We even developed contingency plans. We created our own wares, our medical PPEs. We created traditional medicine to be able to help ourselves. We created test kits, all kinds of things we created. So the minute the world locks us out, we will be forced to create. Why do we need to wait for the world to lock us out for us to create?
Well, so that, I asked that question also, but somehow it appears that, well, the vision of the visionary in Africa coincides with this crisis, so that the global supply chains have now also been a bit, not totally ostracized, but we are beginning to see a shift from the global supply chain towards more regional and localized supply chains. Countries are expected to rebalance their over-reliance on distant suppliers in favor of more proximate suppliers. This could have more positive impact on ongoing efforts to boost Africa regional value chains. In the line of this, before now, we've been talking about global value chains, but Africa now seems to now begin to say, hey, can we trade with each other? Now, COVID-19 is also expected to cause a shift from over-reliance on global manufacturing. So there's a supply bit, there's a manufacturing bit, so that there's now a release of the capacity for manufacturers to start to produce along the regions or along the hubs. This too can also be a boon, all right, for ongoing efforts to boost African industrialization. So as Africa begins to think on how to be more competitive, as they begin to increase their capacity to manufacture and meet the demands, as they alter the supply chain value chain, we will begin to see that there will be an increased industrialization. And this is what Caroline was talking around when she said that when countries become richer, all right, and they become richer in the right way, the citizenry, the people become richer also, not the rich becoming richer and the poor becoming poorer. Africa's opportunity to accelerate e-commerce, and we've seen that Nigeria has been a huge beneficiary. In fact, earlier on today, I was talking with one of the key persons in driving this the economic e-commerce drive in Africa, and she was telling me about some of our plans for 2021. That the digital economy is further being enhanced. The fourth industrial revolution is taking place, and which without a doubt, this is one of the beneficiaries of, or this is one of the aftermath of the COVID-19. And this has had the greatest long-term and will have, or indeed have the greatest long-term impact on Africa. We hear now Paystack, even though we're not marketing for them, there was a way they came in and somehow, all right, an international company decided to invest in them. This is not coincidence. It's not a coincidence. Even Flutterwave, as we on good authority, they've had some injection of inflow because it's clear now that Africa will find its alternative, and the big guys don't want to be left out. So African champions will soon publish a list of countries that have turned to local sources. So there's also a group of people, they call them African champions. And I'm hoping that at some point, Lady Jostibe and indeed Taiwo Adepoju will be one of those African champions. Indeed, we are African champions, yes, but yes, we will be listed as one, just so as to say, look, we have started to understand some of our startups, some of those that we work with, that have started to also, play this role by engaging. And we hope that this would help with the African drive and indeed the Afcfta agreement. And these opportunities created, we will be rightly positioned to also get more people aware and get them to start to trade with Africa. So there's a silver lining in the COVID-19 crisis for Africa and indeed after.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Why is Afcfta a big deal? I know that's a lot of you have been waiting, so let's dive into it. Let's dive into it. Why is Afcfta a big deal? So the first thing is, according to Nairametrics in 2019, the agreement is to connect 54 countries with over 1 billion people and create a single $3.4 billion market. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, described the agreement as a potential economic game changer. Allow me to put that in simple English that you and I can understand. So you are in Nigeria or you are in Cote d'Ivoire today, and you are servicing a marketplace of just the few people in your country, right? And you're even struggling to find those who are truly interested in your products and services. Meanwhile, Afcfta is saying, allow me show you 1.4 billion people that are like you and may be interested in what it is that you carry. And it's not as if you are paying for advert. You understand what I mean? You're not paying for advert yet. At least yet we have not gotten to that stage. We're just saying, come and be a part of it. So that's a literal economic game changer for you as a business owner who is trading on that platform. And that's why the IMF even looked at the entire thing and said, oh, more, if Africa can get this right, everything about them will change. And need I make you understand that, I mean, that's not why we're here, but the world is not going to watch and just watch Africa want to take themselves out where we are. They're not going to watch. And that's me being realistic. A lot of ways, different interferences will try to come in to try and keep us where we are, because Africa is where we are because of forces beyond itself. So it goes to show you that as young Africans, the onus is on us to make sure this thing works. We must get into that seat where we are holding the African Union to their words, to say, you set up an agreement. Can we work with you as people to say, we love this thing. We have seen the economic game changer it's going to bring to this continent, and by extension, all of us individually. Can we make sure this thing works? Because the minute all of us turn our eyes away from it and say, well, it's an AU initiative, the day is going to start to crash. None of us are going to know. None of us are going to pay attention, and we'll keep doing what we are doing. But once we get sold into the vision completely, it will become our collective responsibility to make sure that this 1.4 billion market with a $3.4 billion revenue market is created for us Africans to leverage. So what we're doing with this course is information and charging at the same time. We're informing you and we're charging you to not take this information as one of those informations, but to get into that seat where an opportunity has been handed to you. And there's a potential for somebody to snatch it off of you. Would you keep quiet? And there's a potential for you to take advantage of it. Would you look the other way? That's what we're doing with this course. And the next thing is the Afcta brings together 1.3 billion people and a combined gross domestic product, GDP of more than $2 trillion. If ratified by each country, to become one of the world's largest trading blocs. In terms of the countries participating, this will be the largest trade agreement since the formation of the World Trade Organization in 1994. Allow me to just unbundle this particular statement. The World Trade Organization was created in 1994, and us, Afcta, we created the largest trade bloc by number of countries in participation in 2018. And you think the world is going to watch and say, Africa, come on fast. No, they are not going to watch. For your information, I need us to know that. If we know that, we understand what we're up against, and all of us step into it and say collectively, this thing is our birthright and it must work. And then the third thing is Afcfta commits countries to remove tariff on 90% of goods, progressively liberalize trade in services, and address a host of non-tariff barriers. We're going to talk about non-tariff barriers as we go further, like long delays at national borders, which hamper trade between African countries. Basically, what it's trying to say is that with the Afcfta, you can import goods cheap. You can trade cheaply. Like the reason why we are all running to China is you can buy something for $3. That's why we're all running to China. But Afcfta has said they're going to impose that, see, let's make this thing cheap. So that Africans are looking at each other as we too were China. We don't need to run there, we can buy from here. That's basically what this is saying. So it's a relief for you who is a buyer as an African person. It's also a relief for you who is a trader as an African person, because the more affordable your product is, the more it will move in the marketplace. So what Afcfta is turning you into by advance is you will move from just being a retailer to a wholesaler. And guess what? The wholesalers are making so much money because numbers is the game.
The numbers game
is the game. So 1.4 billion people, if they say you were selling something at 10,000 naira, I'm giving an example, if you're a Nigerian, 10,000 naira, and they say, don't worry, give it to us at 3,000 or 4,000, especially if it's not below your cost price, okay? Maybe you are making just 1,000 on it, and you're calculating 1,000 times 1 billion people. Excuse me? That's a lot of money. So we need to look at it from what this Afcta is creating for us is for us to move from just being retailers who are trading shop to shop, person to person, to increasing our capacity to become wholesalers and become billionaires. Do you see what this is? It's such an opportunity. It's such an opportunity, right? Yes. I know you want to say something. Let me just say the last thing and then you can chip in. Afcta will provide access to markets at the regional and international level. Meaning, in this Afcta, other countries will come and trade with us. Because see, it's not going to be trading at our own terms. We have our trade block. They are coming to trade with us at that level, right? That means you, who would ordinarily want to trade with a supplier before, and you have been finding it difficult to put a face, a name, or everything to it, because we have an organized trade body that makes that system transparent, you can interact with anybody at an international level via that platform, leveraging that platform and the transparency and the competitiveness that it brings. And then what this goes to say is that it will generate state revenue, it will increase the farmer's income, and expand both farmer and country capacity to invest in modernizing the sector through processing and mechanization. This statement is very pregnant, but let me allow Mr. Tai will talk a little bit just about this.
No, I love the flow, because you even just started to talk around the implications, all right, for businesses and SMEs. And, you know, when we talk about SMEs or MSMEs, or we talk about IDs or social enterprises, one thing is clear. Look, Africans, as we are right now, there clearly is a need for us to reorientate our minds, ourselves, and not just treat this as a document or it is them against us. I recall when Lady Ibe was saying something. She said, guys, be ready. And as you get ready, and you know, the examples I like to use would be somebody wants to come and trade with you, or somebody wants to come and invest. You must be ready and prepared. You cannot be unequally yoked, because if your standards are low, they will take over and we will still now not be the greatest beneficiary. So are you organizing your industry? Are you organizing your trade? What are you doing? Have you taken the bull by the horn by setting out certain things in place that makes you to be globally competitive? I like to use the word global. Do you have a global, approach, but with a local, resource? And so that if anybody comes today, when they look at your books, when they want to partner with you, they can say, wow, this company is excellently run. And that's why there will be a lot of trainings, and I know the African Startup Association is going to be doing a lot of stimulations and trainings to get people either in terms of bookkeeping, to get people trained along various segments, just so as to be ready. Because it won't just be only marketing. So I had a discussion with someone a few days ago, and he said, look, the problem with Africa is not marketing. We have the market, 1.3, 1.4 billion people. All right. But how ready are we to ensure that we can get goods delivered? So there's logistics. How ready are we to ensure there's operations management, efficiency? How ready are we to ensure that there's tracking, monitoring, and several other things? What about the labeling? What about printing? What about look, a huge gamut of opportunities await Africans. So guys, we're on to talking about the implications, and we'll run forward now to talk about how Afcfta affects or what it means for entrepreneurs. And we're going to be talking about the rights, obligations, and opportunities. So a legal framework highlighting the rights and obligations of startups is there. There's going to be guides as to how can we trade with each other. There's also going to be easier networking with all other African entrepreneurs. And I love what TAS is currently doing. They've created the opportunity for Africans, particularly startups across Africa, to have that closer or easier network. So networking across Africa, which was difficult before, is now being, is now being removed. Entrepreneurs can network better and with each other and understand the markets and trends around the continent. We have talked about competitiveness. In fact, we cannot overemphasize that it's going to make us more competitive. There's going to be integration of startups, and it's going to make it easier, all right, for us to open business elsewhere. So if you're operating in say Dakar, you can move on to Gaborone, or you move on to Lesotho. It's easier to be able to set up business, and there'll be better movement of goods and services. So our rights will be defined. You have the rights are well set out. The obligations on each part, our responsibilities will be well highlighted, and the opportunities are humongous. So whatever you're doing now, you must start to see, how can I pivot or how can I scale this business? You have been playing small for too long. The mandate now is to start to think big and position globally. Lady, I don't know if you have some few thoughts around that.
Fantastic. So basically, I mean, opportunities like I've mentioned, all of it is just a lot. It's a lot. And when I think about the AFCTA, I think about an economic savior to Africa as a whole. And when I say economic savior to Africa as a whole, I'm talking about economic savior to you, the SME, the startup who's listening to me today. Because technically, what you were not able to do because of your capacity, somebody has said, don't worry, let me bring you to you. All you need to do is decide that you want to play inside of it. So it's now you developing your capacity to actually deliver the things that it is that you do. So one of the things I want a lot of you who are listening today is to make a mental note to say, listen, I have seen an opportunity, and in 2021, it doesn't matter what happens, I am a part of AFCTA. I've become an evangelist and a disciple of AFCTA, and I will factor it into everything I'm doing in my entire business plan so that young entrepreneurs can begin to move into I want to have businesses in 12 countries in Africa. Now it's easy for you to cross-pollinate. It's easy for you to become a global champion, especially on the African continent. It's easy for you to think about potential collaboration and partnerships in all the other African countries. Because one of the things we want to do with the Association of African Startups is that we want to say, if you're in Ghana and you have been thinking of coming to Nigeria to do business, there's a Nigerian member here. Can you have a conversation with them so that two of you can think about how you can do this business, and vice versa? So we, on a scale like that, are trying to do it. So imagine what Afcfta is offering to all of us. Make a mental note to be one of the first movers and shakers in this particular initiative, and it will potentially turn us around in Africa.
Wow. So I love what TAS is doing. And, just also to support that, we're also working with, ensuring that we can also help with proper structuring of businesses at Strength Africa with insights, with research and strategy. So this is also, there will be a rise. There will be a rise on e-commerce. Remember, before we've been trading, and I don't know if it's an African problem, but in Nigeria, there's usually a difficulty as to payments, all right, and switching and channels. Now, that has frustrated businesses even for Nigerians, or even global, particularly in the continent. And you would understand why you have seen investments, some strategic investments in e-commerce. Because when Africa starts to trade with itself, all right, they're not going to be trading with cash. So fintech, all right, the e-commerce will begin to express an explosion in terms of the business-to-business consumption, which is estimated at over $4 trillion, by 2030. Consumption alone is expected to grow by $4 trillion, with private consumption reaching about 2.3 trillion US dollars. All right, there will be about 1.2 billion consumers to about 1.7 billion consumers by 2023, because by 2030, that means that people will be paying now. So in Kenya today, we have M-Pesa. All right. In Nigeria, we are going to have, we already even have our Flutterwave, we have our Paystack.
There's TriSeller too. TriSeller is a new
TriSeller, yes. And everybody is
yes.
Yeah, and people are gearing up. So there's a game-changing, atmosphere going on now. And there will now be a trade. There will be, imagine earnings from about 1.2 billion persons, even if it was just a cent. You can imagine the increase, the gigantum of wealth that is seated within Africa. It's enormous. So people are now going to be saying, hey, how did I miss that opportunity? And so and that's what we're saying. Look, people will come in and say, guys, can I be a part of your company? Because they already know what is there. Can I come and just plug in? Because we can't eliminate the fact that Africa will have to trade with itself. And so e-commerce will be on the right. And the aggregate GDP, it's between 2.1 trillion and $3.4 trillion.
Can I say something here? As you were speaking, something came to my mind. Who is the next Alibaba and Amazon of Africa?
Yeah.
I'm trying this open to anyone who is listening to me today. As we're talking about e-commerce. Who is going to be the next Alibaba and Amazon of Africa, considering the fact that we have the largest trade bloc in the world by number of countries trading on this platform? Meaning you can potentially become richer than these two men collectively if you start to think about this market. Mr. T said something earlier. He said even if it's 1 cent you are collecting across board, 1.4 billion people on a daily basis. I'm giving an example. It's wow. I don't know the potentials. As I'm speaking to you, I'm asking my brain, what are we going to set up? What is that one thing that Africans will need, like they need air, and so that I can become collectively a bigger Alibaba and Amazon put together? And I know somebody's listening to me and say, oh, please, I'm not motivating you. I'm telling you what is possible because I'm looking at the numbers. I'm looking at the numbers. Alibaba and Amazon, most of their largest purchases come from Africa. We're buying so much from those guys. So imagine that there's a positioned person for Africa, by Africa. Oh Lord, that's going to change everything forever. So I need us as startups, as SMEs. Yes, please. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, okay, so imagine if we were able to print quality books and magazines in Africa, and then a foreign company says, you know what, help me with my printing and distribute across Africa. It's easier for them to have the African company print and distribute across Africa in line with what is going on than print in, say, in the US and start to ship down here. So truly, like we said, and I love that analogy. Who is the next Alibaba? All right. Yeah. Who is the next Jeff?
You know, and market and people are not thinking of filling the gap. E-commerce is one of the things of the future. So somebody somewhere should start thinking, I want to be the next Alibaba, the next Amazon. Amazon started from his garage selling books. He's grown he's grown. I don't even want to talk about oh God, the way those guys became rich during lockdown. And guess what? To start an e-commerce site called Leo, it's not hard though. And I know that there are e-commerce businesses that are somewhere that have started. There are good names in Africa. There are lots of good names, but you now have to start thinking about the science of scale. You now have to start thinking about the science of scale. You now have to start thinking, how do I build capacity to move from being predominant in one market to being predominant in the 54 countries? We need to think that, because if all of us from all the world can buy from Amazon and Alibaba, why can't somebody from all over the world buy from Jumia, Konga? Do you see how we must begin to think? That's what it is. And so let's move on to the next thing. I don't know if you have something to say before we talk about the next thing, Mr. T.
No, I just, you see, this cannot be exhausted in one discussion. And I love the fact that we're just touching this, and playing with it, because I'm sure some people are listening today and are beginning to say, okay, truly, can I start to position my business? Now, and that's why we said it's the doing that will get the job done. Yes. So if you're not currently starting something, you must start. All right? It's about starting. Because once you start, you are ready, your baby, whatever it is, the idea starts now. Because as you start, then that means you are even in a more potential place to experience the benefits of after. And so the next slide talks about the biggest expected gains. All right?
There's likely to be a 7% point decline in the iceberg cost of importing, with minor variations across sector and source regions. Meaning that if we are going to be trading amongst ourselves in Africa, there's going to be a decline in the cost of importation, because the borders will have almost gone down completely, because there's going to have been an orientation of the customs, immigrations, so that they can allow things that were not being allowed before fly. And also because we now know that it's a single market. And also earlier in the slides, Mr. T talked about a single airline carrier. So these things would reduce how much you're actually paying on importation once we're doing trade amongst ourselves. Another thing is these are expected in countries such as Cameroon, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Egypt, Nigeria, Tanzania, with a decline in trade costs by 10% points. In Nigeria, it's estimated to be at 31.8%, in Congo 23.7%, in Cameroon 17.9%, in Egypt 16.7%, then in Kenya 10.9%. So this is what it's currently costing them. But with this implementation, there's going to be a reduction at least by 10% from what you currently have. And as an entrepreneur or as a business owner, if you calculate 10% out of what you're currently paying to be able to import, you would see that it's such a huge relief for your business, and it's to give you advantage to be able to get more profit. One of the reasons why it looks like things may be expensive is because people are importing at a larger rate. And so it's a no-brainer. The selling price has to be expensive. But the minute that these barriers are brought down and the cost of importation is reduced, you will find that the product that was costing an exorbitant amount of money also will come down. That will now give you a potential to be able to reach a lot more people because of the price range, and of course, leveraging the already large audience that we have in the Afcta.
Good. Now, so, and this takes us to benefits for member countries, because I'm sure people are wondering, they say, is it only Nigeria? Is it only Cameroon? Is it only, we're saying all member countries, and wherever you are in any part of Africa, is going to lead to a lower cost for consumers and producers. That means that if you want to move raw material, say from, say, Niger Republic, or you're moving it into Ghana, you'd find out that because there are no trade barriers, the cost has been reduced. That iceberg cost has been eliminated. You would find out that the cost is reduced in producing whatever I want to produce. And this is passed on to the consumer. That means the consumer also now experiences a reduced cost. Also, there's going to be a reduction in the administrative bureaucracy, the red tapeism. So there are things that the protocols have negotiated. There are agreements and clauses that have been agreed on, and we've identified the goods and services that will be allowed to move intra-border. It therefore means that there will be no need to start saying, you bring this, you go and get approval for this. No, excuse me. It means that now, because all of those bottlenecks over time will be eliminated, this will lead to a reduction in red tapeism, which ultimately leads to time loss. Because in Africa, there's one of the things that we lose greatly, and is the loss of time. Loss of time in registration, loss of time in doing things. Even the ease of doing business is strangulated because of time. Time is, and time is of essence. And thirdly, there will be a reduction in compliance costs. Therefore, there are some things that currently right now, because of the way the countries are all structured individually, they've put some compliance costs, like maybe NAFDAC, this one, that one. But once we've established as this are on the list, and this can easily move as long as they meet certain criteria, then there will be no need, all right, to start to, have a double cost, or double handling of such costs. So that will be the benefit to member countries. We move on now to the trade barriers. So you might want to take this, and then I'll take it on from there.
So NTBs, we talked about it earlier, but let's go just a bit deeper into it, okay? Non-tariff barriers are restive regulatory procedures other than tariffs that add difficulty to the cost of importing and exporting products in a country. From procedural delays at the borders to highly technical products, all these things are long, but let me just give you what I mean. Non-tariff barriers are the different things that makes it difficult for you to import or export goods and services. And you may want to call it bureaucracies. There's a lot of bureaucracies that impede or make things very hard. So you'll find that people move away from those things because, listen, I don't want to deal with the stress of all of these things. Because the United Nations also said that NTBs are at least 3 times more restrictive than regular custom duties. That means the hassle you even go through dealing with the customs in your country is even 3 times much more restrictive. That means if you have these non-STBs not addressed, non-tariff barriers not addressed for Afcta, is going to frustrate all of us, both member countries and individuals that are trading on this particular platform. That is why the Afcta decided that, you see this NTB, we are going to create a department, an annex to tackle all the issues. Because the minute member countries and individuals know that there's an annex specifically dedicated to dealing with any NTB, everybody will be confident enough to want to do business on this platform. E.g., if anybody is causing unnecessary delay, there are people who you will call. Oh yeah, call this person. And the minute it is called, it is resolved. This is the part of the Afcta that needs to be firmed up so much such that if I am at the border at Côte d'Ivoire, or I'm at the border at Seme, and they are giving me issues, I can literally just dial one number, and here and then everything is sorted. That's why this is so important.
Lady,
Yes, please go ahead.
lady, yeah. So, almost like what you were saying now. So what they've now done is that there's now a reporting platform.
Yeah.
And it's there on I'm sure the audience, they can see that tradebarrier.africa. Now, remember I said, is the doing that gets the job done. So for those that this is is no longer an experiment, it's going to be explorative and it's going to be progressing elaborately. That means that if today you want to move, let's say, shea butter from Lagos to say Nairobi, all right, lack of a better example. And as you get to any of the borders, you are restricted. And the provision says that this shea butter can move. You have a right to log in your complaints, still go ahead with your trade. Because in as much as the agreement has been signed, the cascade effect, that's before everybody has a full buy-in. Even it's almost like when countries make decisions, it will take time for it to dovetail to the last man standing. So this platform, this trading reporting platform for NTBs only, would ensure that if you are ready to start to trade, particularly in goods in Africa, you can go and register on tradebarriers.africa. And then whenever you experience a trade barrier, impute it there, document it. What also the Secretariat is looking at is that there are also going to be rooms for reimbursement or compensation. So guys, if you need to document it, document it. But that's the good news. There will be trade barriers. They will be going off, gradually. But remember, you must log in your complaints. And that's the good news about the non-trade barriers.
Fantastic.
Lady.
Thank you so much, guys. We're coming gradually to the end. And I know a lot of you are saying, oh my God, this has been very in-depth. This has been a lot. Yes, we know. But there's nowhere else in Africa where you would find what we have done for you here today. There's Absolutely. Nowhere in Africa. There's nowhere. And we're saying it again. The Association of African Startups and Strengths Africa decided to come together because of our deep love and deep interest in startups in Africa to make this very simple for you to understand. The reason why we are doing this is if we don't tell you, the world will take advantage of a platform and you will never be able to pay attention to it because all the documents are bulky. There's so many things hidden inside that you will never be able to read. So we put together this so that we can help you leverage this platform in the most simplest way. And so in concluding, the Afcfta agreement is set to transform Africa's economy, making it competitive on a global level and unlocking the potential to create and share prosperity on the continent in a uniquely African way. Meaning, I know this is very simple, meaning Africa by Africans for Africans. Africa by Africa for Africa. Meaning everything we have, we can share amongst ourselves. And this makes it very important for the next thing we are talking about. I would like to handle that next part if you don't mind. The mindset.
Please.
The mindset. You see, at the bottom of why we are doing this as a group, Strengths Africa and Task Africa, is that we have gotten to a point where we see ourselves as the saviors of the economy of Africa. I'll say it again. We see ourselves as part of the saviors of the economy of Africa. We see ourselves as part of the economic saviors of Africa. That's why we decided to go into what it is we're doing individually in our work. But what is important is that there is a mindset that is required for the average entrepreneur in Africa to be able to get on board opportunities like this. And that mindset is we are no longer going to wait for aid. We're no longer going to wait and continue to beg and solicit for help. We're no longer going to wait for a Messiah to come and lift you out of where you are. We're going to get into that place where it's okay to dream and dream big. It's okay to see yourself as the next Alibaba and Amazon for Africa. When I said that question, it was a challenge to somebody's mindset to tell you, get top of where you are and stop looking at yourself as a Nigerian champion, as a Ghanaian champion, as a Kenyan champion, and say, I am an African champion. And an African champion will rise with a mindset, there is a market so large and I must take advantage of that market. Considering the fact that there's already a community, all you need to do is leverage on that community to fly on wings of eagles. So I'm challenging your mindset today to say the smallness with which you move your business, the smallness with which you look at your business, the smallness with which you say is community level, I'm just content serving this. That is you not actually telling yourself that I am allowed to do bigger than the shores of my country. As a matter of fact, you are allowed to do bigger than the shores of the African continent. Because once you become an African giant, the world comes to you. Because they see that you have leveraged a market so big, they beg to be a part of what you're doing. They beg to have a slice of what it is you are doing. So I'm challenging your mindset today that as you enter into 2021 and the next decade, it's imperative for you to move into, I have been doing it well too. Africa is waiting and depending on me to move and move with the speed of light. Africa is depending on me breaking the shackles of mediocrity and slavery that has been sold to us from generations after generations to say, no more are we going to rely or depend on anybody else. We are going to take what we have been given, which is ourselves. Ourselves. Ourselves, ourselves, ourselves in all its entirety, the platform, ourselves, the people, ourselves, the market, ourselves, the potential GDP, the revenue that's going to come out, ourselves. And we are going to pull our mind out of smallness and mediocrity and say, you see this ourselves, we are going to leverage it and build the best that the world has never seen, never heard, and will turn Africa's economy around, all of us working together to make this work.
Wow. You know, I felt the energy with which you communicated. And I must say that this is very critical. In fact, we have termed this the fourth priority. And so for all those in the knowledge industry, this is a clarion call that we must mind set. We must mind the set, how we set our mind. We must begin to have a shift in the way we see things. So enough of Africa is cost. Enough of it's not possible. Enough of they can't do it in Africa. It's about time now, almost like leaning on what Lady just said. Look, we must have a paradigm shift, that we can do it. We can become the Amazons of Africa. We can become the Jeff Bezos of Africa. We can become the, whatever it is that we want to become. It will only happen when we set our minds to it. This will not just be a motivation of some sort. It's not an inspirational discussion, but this is something that is critical to enable us, pivot to the next level. And I'll just take this on, and then I allow also Lady to also come in on with a few of the insights. So we came up with 8 key things that are required, and this just basically wraps up all that we are doing. One is that we must know what we are good at, and so it's almost like saying know your strengths. So what essentially are your strengths? Because if you don't know your strengths, then you'll be fighting a lost battle. Beyond knowing your strengths is also to develop the right skills. So with the right skills, you must own your skills to the point where you can be competitive globally. So if you're unskilled or you're skilled, can you improve yourself in whatever you are doing? The third thing is that you must have a strategy. You must have a plan, because when there's no plan, it's almost a plan to fail. And with plans, there must be structure. Remember, everything that we do and we don't put a structure, ultimately, after some time, it begins to collapse. And that moves on to talking about systems. We must create systems within ourselves, amongst our industries, amongst our company, build capacity and all of that. And then the sixth one is synergy. Synergy, popularized by Stephen Covey. He says that 1 + 1 is equals to 8. From the Book of Life that I rightly espouse, it talks about 1 chasing 1,000, 2 chasing 10,000. So imagine when we concert energies across Africa, even if you were just a 100,000 entrepreneurs, what would have happened? Quadruple, an unusual, leap of impact and of progress even in Africa. Then scaling. This word scale and scale and scale. How do we want to be competitive if we're not ready to scale? I use always the example of the lady that sells bean cake, which we call akara, where I come from. The woman disparaged the trade called the selling of or frying of the bean cake, to the extent that that could have probably also become a global franchise like McDonald's or Kentucky Fried Chicken and all the rest of the known names when it comes to fast food. Now, Africa has its own fast food, but Africa has its own fast industries. Africa has its own peculiar markets, but we have not deepened those markets. We have not been able to scale those markets. And rather, we have taken franchises from Europe, from Asia, from South America, even from Canada, to say, okay, that's what was operationalized. It's about time we start to think on how to scale what we're currently doing and then take them to the next level. And finally, sustainability. Everything we're doing, it should be transgenerational. Enough of living from hand to mouth. We see, so, something, and the festive seasons are here. One of the key things that struck me was the fact that I got a gift, and I got a gift of turkey and chicken. And I was tempted not to have them turn those, game to meat for barbecue, because I looked at it, I said, this is the way a typical African operates. All we know is to slaughter every gift that we have. So could I not have, because yes, could I not have just kept the poultry, alive, and then nurtured them so that they can produce more? That was an insight that dropped in my mind, that we need to start to delay gratification. We need to start to think on how we can build legacies that will be transgenerational and intergenerational. All right, and I leave the ladies to just take this on, to the next level.
This is so good. This is so good, Mr. T. This is so good. Like, just listening to you talk about each and every one of these things, encompasses everything we have been talking about from inception of this class till now. If we don't have this 8S in place, you would find that we will not be able to replicate the result of the West. We will start recycling the old things we're trying to do away with. These are the 8S's that will take us to the level where we want to get to, meaning the Africa that we desire. And I'm speaking to every African who is listening to me, whether you're in Africa, in diaspora, anywhere you are. We need to develop these 8S's in all the businesses that we run, in all the initiatives that we create, even in the social impact organizations that we create. We need to begin to cultivate these 8S's so that we can create a scale of impact that has never been seen on the continent of Africa. And you just mentioned to me akara, that bean cake you mentioned,
yes,
and it struck me. There's snacks we have imbibed the McDonald's and turned them into African franchises. What about our own local snacks on the streets of London? And just to buttress what you were saying, I listened to a young lady who went to pitch to, I think, Dragon's Den in the UK. And she had a snack made from, I think, cashew. I can't remember which of the snacks she created. And she said it's African, but she wants that snack to be all over the streets in the UK. If you see the fantastic packaging she did with this little snack, right? And those are the dragons, then they were eating, they loved it. They said, oh, this is so good, this is so scalable in the UK market. So imagine that there are millions of Africans across the world who are taking African snacks and turning them into staple snacks on the streets all over the world. We will start having franchises like KFC, McDonald's in all the different countries in the world that are African born, African created, but for others to also consume. So mindset and all the 8 S's that I mentioned here today are keys that all of us must develop as we enter into the turning point decade for Africa. 2020 to 2030 is a turning point decade for this continent. What we do with this decade will determine what the next century is going to be for this continent. That's if we still exist. I'm saying that because we must get into the driver's seat if we must maximize. There's something called Kairos moments in life. Kairos moment is when you realize that this is a window for you to step in. If you don't step in that window, what happens is the window closes, and then what you were supposed to be able to create is probably taken away from you and probably used against you in so many cases. So, dear Africans listening to me, SMEs, entrepreneurs, startups, whatever category you find yourself, an opportunity has been dropped on our laps. An opportunity to turn our continent around has been dropped on our laps. Our leaders created this for us. So if that's all they did for us as a generation that is the tipping point generation and the turning point generation, they have done a good job. What we do with it is going to determine what we'll become in the next 50 years. And in the past, young Africans, we have had a culture of nonchalance, not paying attention to things that help us. In the past, I see that we're already changing. And that's why we decided to do this course, because we know that a lot of you young Africans are not paying attention. We brought it to your door. After listening to this today, I need you to rally round. Send this course to 20 people in your network and say, I have seen an opportunity that Africans need to step up and build. Come and join me. If you can send it as a broadcast to every contact on your WhatsApp list and say, if you're an African, this course is for you. It will change your life. If you use this singular phrase, and send them the link with which you registered, we will change the game. Because until we get 1 million Africans to begin to say, this is an opportunity, or we can't turn a blind eye. If we turn a blind eye, it will be abused, it will be taken advantage of by the West. And the same platform that was created for you and I to trade will now become a platform where we don't even exist in. That's why you that is on this course right now, pick up your phone, share button, the link where you're using registering, send it as a broadcast to all your WhatsApp contacts, send it to your email list, put it on your Instagram, your Twitter, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, share it. Africans must arise. And it starts with personal responsibility to the simplest informations that will transform us. The Europe, China, America, they're a lot more interested in Afcfta than you. Let me shock you. They are more interested because they have seen an opportunity. And not on my watch will Africans turn a blind eye. Not on my watch. I say it again, not on my watch. And that's why we have done our bit. And I'm going to push and I'm going to implore you to do your own bit by listening, taking action, and sharing it to everybody that exists in your network, as long as they have an African blood running in their veins. Thank you all so very much for listening to this program. We will see you again in the next cohort of this program. Mr. T, do you have anything to say?
No, you've said it now. So listen, take action, and share. And that will be the model for even the advancement of this course across Africa. Until we all start to know, we also cannot start to trade. And whatever we attend to, give attention to, attends to us. So on this note, I just like to say thank you, Lady Joss, for this opportunity to be able to even spread this gospel called Afcfta, all right? And there will be people that will tell you that Afcfta is this, Afcfta is that. But can we have a positive mindset? Can we begin to embrace this? Can we begin to say, okay, can we make it work? Yes. If it has worked, today you have the EU, there's the Brexit, all right? Yes. Some people are working now, they're doing the same thing. Yes. So what must we do? If it might not drop immediately, but we would have started to make progress. There's a Chinese proverb that says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time to plant it is now. All right, guys, it's now,
Thank you
it's
so
now,
very
and
much.
it's now.
Thank you so very much, Mr. T from Strengths Africa and Startup Summit Africa, for joining us on this particular episode to make it available to all of Africans. And for every African who has listened to this today, I want to say that you are one of the privileged few. Yes. You are one of the privileged few, because when God wants to bless somebody, he gives you access to wisdom. Once you have access to wisdom, you begin to operate at an unfair advantage over your competition. So you are one of those privileged few who have learned the basics of the Afcta and what to do. The next thing I need you to do is share this across your network. And another thing that you must do is follow the Association of African Startups, follow Strengths Africa. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, even on Twitter. Follow our social media pages. And if you haven't joined the Association of African Startups, this is the right time to join it, because what we are doing is creating a network of African entrepreneurs in the 55 countries in Africa. Right now, we have members from 10 different countries, and we officially kick off January 5th, 2021 with our Learning Hub. What the Learning Hub is about is we gathered 36 trainers and 12 mentors from across the 55 countries in Africa to come and train you and build your capacity. We talked about capacity in today's class. We have put this structure in place to train you on everything you need to know to build a sustainable business in Africa. And it starts January 5th, 2021. All you need to do to get started and to be a part of it is www.taskafrica.org/registration, www.taskafrica.org/registration. The flagship speaker and what they're going to be talking about is how to recondition your mindset to achieve all your goals. Yes, that's what the first speaker is talking about, so that you can tune your mind to achieve your goals in 2021, and then all the other things we'll be doing in the association for 2021. It's a lot of activities all planned out for you, and we look forward to having a smooth and fantastic ride with you. Thank you all so very much, and we wish you a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year, all of us in Africa. Thank you all so much.